Thanks for joining us, saying happy Friday to you. I'm Marlon Bowling, your tour guide to the ag commodities. So glad you could join us today. Well, we're going to put the wraps, by the time we finish up today's trade, we're going to put the wraps on the last full trading week of May. And next week, when we come back, of course, there will be no ag trade on Monday because it'll be Memorial Day. So the markets will be shut down, and that means it'll be a short trading week. And we will already be rolling over into June next week. So this is kind of important trading that we see today as we head toward the weekend. I am joined by Mr. Brian Hoops. Now, he is the president of Midwest Market Solutions, and they have several locations around the western part of the Midwest. Always a treat to talk with you, Brian, about the markets. I scanned the wires a little bit ago. I didn't see any flash export sales, and you had to wonder if there wasn't something in the works here the last couple of days that was propping up the markets, especially soybeans here lately. And I didn't see anything show up this morning. Did you?
Yeah, good morning, Marlon. No private export sale announcements reported. So one sale last week, another sale this week. It's been pretty slow as far as these private sales go. I know the market is trying to anticipate that China is going to come back off of their COVID lockdowns and start buying aggressively once again, but we really haven't seen any evidence of that. So, that may be a little bit of a negative for us this morning, the lack of these sales. However, we're looking at weather over a long 3-day weekend coming up. Spring wheat producers in the northern plains, they've had a very small window this week, and our office up there in Thief River Falls, Minnesota tells us, in a 100-mile radius, there's very little field work being done. It's just too wet to even think about planting corn, spring wheat, or anything. And so, that's going to be a supportive feature to wheat, I think, as that window is getting very small to get the crop in the ground yet. And that also applies to corn. There's a lot of corn grown up in that area, but they're already switched to their shortest hybrids possible. And that corn is not going to be able to be seeded. So we are going to lose some acres out of the Dakotas and northern Minnesota regions.
Well, since you have locations in that part of the country there, what are we looking at from your estimation as far as acres that we may lose of corn this year? I'm talking acres here.
Yeah, typically when you have a late planted year like this, you lose about 2% of your total production. So if we look at what the USDA said back in March, you could be looking at, maybe 1.8 million acres or 2 million acres lost production. And that doesn't count the crop that's been planted, and then we'll have a yield drag because of the late seeded nature. So it's just areas that are going to look at prevent plant or switching of acres out of corn into a small grain, maybe soybeans. They may pick up some acres in these areas. It really depends on how quickly they can get back in the fields, because this weekend it's a pretty wet event of heavy rain all the way into next week. So we're certainly expecting acres out of those regions to be down significantly. Maybe you pick up a few acres out of some of areas out of the plains, but I don't know that you're going to see a lot of changes as far as increased corn acres in a lot of areas. More likely, we're just going to see 1.8 million, 2 million acres lost overall this year.
Well, in Tim Ross's maps that he has been showing, as we get into the core of the growing season in the summer, everything seems to indicate dry conditions in the western corn belt, and that means there's going to have to be a lot of irrigation. And you happen to see natural gas prices yesterday? They are about triple what they were last winter. And that could be a big concern, because not only irrigation costs, but also the energy that we'll need to dry that crop in the fall if it's going to be a late crop. This could be a big-time cost for producers out there. I do want to run through our prices overnight, and then we'll take a look at livestock here in a moment. So on the corn market, we actually firmed up a little bit. July was 4 higher. We had December corn 5.5 higher in the overnight trade. In the soybean market, Globex had July just 1/4 cent higher, and November was down 4 3/4 cents. Now to the wheat. With these quotes provided by Bar Chart, Chicago July wheat was 2 3/4 cents higher overnight. In Kansas City wheat, you had July actually 1/2 cent higher, but all the other months were just a touch lower. Spring wheat, Brian, that you were talking about, it had big gains in July. Spring wheat in Minneapolis up 14 3/4 cents last night. We'll take a break right here, and Brian, we'll talk about that livestock trade when we come back in just a moment. Well, we're back talking with Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. Time to talk a little livestock market action. Brian, we had a little bit of cash cattle activity. Now, some analysts had thought maybe we were done for the week, but it looks like we had some that showed up yesterday. Let's take a look at what we had. They appeared to have been a little bit weaker once again. Livestock summary. If we take a look at those numbers on the cash cattle trade yesterday, looks like we had trade anywhere from 136 to 138. So I believe the lower end of that was actually another dollar lower than what we had the day or two before. So I'm going to call it steady to weaker. The dress basis sales were about identical to what we had on Tuesday, I believe, and so we'll just call that one steady. Still nothing to report for cash live hog sales around the country. The carcass basis hogs, though, were said to be down about $1.27 yesterday. We're heading into a weekend. What kind of a monkey wrench does that throw into the slaughter schedules and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Marlon. We've been really killing a lot of cattle the last couple of weeks, over 680,000 head last week. We're on pace to match that or even do better if a big Saturday kill develops this week. It tells us we're pulling cattle ahead. We're certainly not behind or backing cattle up, which is bullish for the long term for the cattle market. And then you look at yesterday's steer carcass weights, they were down about 7 pounds. That puts them 3 pounds below last year's levels. That's the first time we've been below a year ago on steer weights since January. So yeah, good news as far as going through this month and working through these cattle. Now next week is the holiday shortened kill week with Memorial Day. Packers may try and make up for that on a big Saturday kill next week. So we'll be watching that closely. But it's a sign that the Packers are trying to move through and kill some of these cattle fairly aggressively. I think that sets us up for some rallies going into the spring and the summer. Right now, the technicals are kind of working against us. We don't have the fund buying, the fund short covering, but look how quickly the hog market turned. We fell to some weekly chart support, and then all of a sudden we've got all kinds of short covering lifting the hog market without really any change in the pure fundamentals of the market. You know, right now the cattle market, I think, has some positive fundamentals. It just is lacking that spark or that spec buying to give us a rally.
Okay, so let's review where we closed yesterday. Then we'll go through these livestock trades. And as of the end of the trading day yesterday, you had the June live cattle up a dime. The August only 7 higher. We were at 132.60. All the deferreds were anywhere from 2 to 27 cents lower beyond that. On the feeder cattle market, yesterday we closed the August contract $1.27 lower at 166.67. We had triple-digit losses on the first 3 months, and on lean hogs, wow, they came roaring back, and you had June up 205, and July was 387 higher yesterday at 111.82. We'll see if they can continue that here this morning. Thanks, Brian, for the help. Brian Hoops, Midwest Market Solutions, with us, and Janet will get underway with the trade in just a few minutes.